What's up, y'all? This is something I'm going to call story time. I want to give you, before I go off of the earth at some point in the future, there's a few stories in my life that I think are pretty entertaining. So this will be the first, and maybe I'll keep them coming if you guys like it. It's just going to go to my private circle and YouTube page, but I'll even send it out to clients. I don't know if you guys will have any idea. This is my background, but I was definitely a troubled, rebellious child, I will say. I essentially am going to tell you a story that happened when I was 17, going on 18, and was basically, I started partying early. I grew up around a lot of other guys that were older than me in my neighborhood. So I was exposed to stuff probably way too young. But in any event, there's a Summerfest festival that goes on in Milwaukee, Wisconsin every summer. And it's something that everybody looks forward to. It was used to be like a 10-day pocket, late June into the 4th of July weekend. Lots of music, concerts. If you're in high school, college, or an adult, you go see who you want to see for performances and you get drunk, and that's the thing. So I was always the one leading the way in terms of going to Summerfest and finding the area where we could jump over a 12-foot wall and get in for free. So anyways, you do the pre-partying thing, and I must have been 17 based on the way the story went. A group of guys and I, we went under this place called the Hone Bridge, which is nearby on Lake Michigan in Milwaukee, near the Summerfest grounds, doing our thing, having a good time. Mostly white boys, kind of a crappy suburb, but suburbanites, drinking beers, doing beer bongs and stuff like that. Nothing crazy in terms of drugs or anything. Just drinking. And we were having a good time, but we were parked there. And then it just so happened that like a car away or something, I don't remember exactly how close they were, there was a group of like 6 or 8 Mexican guys. And it became evident fairly quickly. Like we were getting along, we were just having a good time. We were talking to them, they were talking to us. And I remember talking to one of them, and he was essentially showing me his trunk. And there was like an insinuation of, if you ever need anything, let us know. And then another guy who I'll never forget his name was Junior, and you'll know why I'll never forget his name in a minute. But and when I was 17, I lifted a lot of weights, and I was cut up, and I looked strong. I had big triceps and stuff. So I wasn't like a crazy nerd, but everybody was like skinny, and I remember like gangsters, but they were gangsters. They were all Latin kings. Okay. Definite Latin kings, which are prevalent in the Midwest. And essentially, I remember him giving me a business card, which I was impressed by. And the business card showcased something like stereo installation and painting stuff. But he was like, dude, if you ever need any, drugs or guns or whatever, hit me up. So I took his card. We all said goodbye with a nice little, high five. And I have that card. So fast forward a couple of months, probably, my mother's friend, through her work, had, I believe it was 4 tickets to see the Milwaukee Brewers play the Toronto Blue Jays in like the first round of the playoffs. It was a big game, and I took my friend, I believe I had 4. I might have only had 2 tickets because I took my best friend from kindergarten, Elliot Berry. God rest his soul, rest in peace. I've unfortunately had an exorbitant number of my earliest friends that have committed suicide, and Elliot did so when we were about 30 years old. But in any event, I took him to the game, and I just remember saying to him, I go, dude, you mind if we skip this, and I'll buy us lunch, and we'll get some, somewhere. He's like, yeah, I don't care. So I call Junior's pager, okay? I beep him, And I'm like, dude, because I sold the 4 tickets, and I don't know what I got, a few $100. So I said, I need an ounce of weed. And this was my first real entrepreneurial endeavor. I became, which to this day, I never, like, even the way I was brought up, it's not like there was some strict moral code, but I believe I always had a compass. And so, crack or something, I never, I didn't even smoke it. At that point in my life, I had tried it when I was younger, really young. I think they say the first time you smoke weed, you got to have that bad buzz or whatever. And I just didn't like it. I never did it. I was an athlete, but I said to myself, I could chop this thing up into dime bags, and I know enough people, I'll probably double my money. We'll see how long it'll take to sell it. So I became a dime bag only marijuana dealer, basically. Not like, hey, do you have a quarter ounce for me, or a half an ounce, or an ounce? I'd say, I'll give you 5 dime bags for $50. But that was it. That's how I kept it. And I don't know how long that lasted. I think it was probably initiated in August, and then fast forward into November. And so, several months, I probably had about a dozen guys from school and stuff that would, technically page me. We had a pager back then. They'd page me every week, and I'd go drop off 2 dimes or a dime or 3 dimes or whatever. And I also was working. I was working at a grocery store as like, whatever you call it. I wasn't a stocker, but I was like, taking the carts back in and cleaning up this or that. So I was working a good amount. I was going to school. And frankly, part of all this started because the one thing I didn't mention is that I believe it was June or July before this happened in August. I came home from a party, a college party, at about 3 a.m. on, I believe it was a Friday night going into Saturday. And my mother was in the kitchen, very, very disturbed. And I had seen my mother and father leaving the house that night before I went out, said goodnight, got into a car, went out, had a good time, came back. I was buzzed up. And it was a normal thing. My dad was on the couch. They were watching TV. And she said, your father's dead. So that was a interesting, pivotal moment in my life because it spurred a lot of good things, actually. And I kind of hated my father, but I actually didn't hate my father. I hated his alcoholism and some of the mental illness and damage that really he got from Vietnam. And I understand that now. And so it all makes so much more sense. But at the time, like, I was very angry with my dad because he didn't work. He'd be drunk all the time. And, I grew up with him as a teenager by going into a bar after school and playing pool and trying to hustle money from a bunch of drunks. And I resented my dad. He was a good guy, like a cool dude, but he wasn't well. But the way he died so quickly, it happened instantly. He had an abdominal aneurysm on the couch that night. So that's why it was like shut, open door shut. So by the way, before all this, I was like a 1.8 GPA student. Like, I did not like school. I loved learning, and I would do weird stuff like skip out all the time, but I would go to the local library and I would study thesauruses and dictionaries so that I had a vast vocabulary. And my friends used to laugh at me, but I was like, I'm not learning anything. I hate school. They don't teach me anything I want to know. And I was just very rebellious. I was not a good student. I was a terrible student in terms of grades. And ironically, after my father died, that was going into my senior year, and I became a 4.0 student that year. Not to mention, though, and this is where it'll be part of the story, I didn't have enough credits to graduate on time despite 1 year of all straight A's because of how bad I did my freshman and sophomore year and junior year. Anyway, so going back to, I'm now in the fall of that year, which I believe was 92. It must have been 1992. And, every, whatever it was, every week or two or whatnot, I paged Junior. I forgot how I even went to go see him because he lived like maybe I had access to a car at that point. I had a driver's license. The problem was like I was so embarrassed ever to drive any car that we owned because they were all hoopties. But maybe I took that down there. I don't remember. I took the bus because he was down on the south side of the city of Milwaukee. And so I'd go down there as a regular transaction for months. I also, my ambition started to surface as well in terms of like, I remember this guy, Carlton Cheats, who, sold this like, I don't know if it was cassette tapes at that time. It was a program about how to invest in real estate. So I ordered stuff like that. And it's not like I was a banking big drug dealer. I mean, I was selling, maybe an ounce of weed or two a week and making, $300-400 a week on that. And maybe whatever, a few $100 a week on my part-time job. But it was enough to where like, I bought myself stuff. And, I had like a brand new stereo and things like that and some other little perks. And I was lifting weights and getting into shape, and I had all the best supplements. So, it was like a little extra money. It didn't last that long until one day in November of '92, my friend Kurt was picking me up on a Friday night to go to a party down in University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, where we had friends that had graduated already. And, they had this like weekly Friday party thing or whatever. So I remember I'm getting ready. I still had hair then. I'm putting in the gel, and, I've got this cool ass shirt on and thinking I'm going to, make an impression with all the college girls. And knock on the door. I go out, and it's like this older looking dude, and he basically busts in the door and said, are you Eric Lashinsky? Yeah. Busted the door. The city of Cudahy, which had about 20,000 people, probably every freaking cop that you could imagine that existed in the police squad, rushed into my house with dogs, put me on the ground in front of my mother in my living room, handcuffed me, because this dirt ball that I sold dime bags to, who was like a juvenile delinquent, I didn't know him at all really, but he got busted with weed at school. So they got him to narc on me. Where did you get this? Who'd you get it from? I mean, that's how they do it. And they usually do it where, like, if you're caught selling, possession with intent to deliver. Now, mind you, like, looking back on this, I was selling dime bags of weed, guys. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, it was illegal at the time. I just didn't think I was going to get raided by like a SWAT team. They did search the house, they do all this stuff. They bring me into the station. Luckily, my sister wasn't there. My younger sister was somewhere, and I was glad, always happy and thankful that she didn't witness that, because, it really hurt my mom. And my friend Kirk figured out something was off when all the cop cars were in front of my house and I wasn't coming out to get a ride. But, they took me in, and essentially it was right before my 18th birthday. I found out later that the charges wouldn't have stuck as an adult, and they would have basically been meaningless. There was something wrong with the way that they did the procedure. But they were like, look, you're either going to face a serious charge of possession with the intent to deliver, and they gave me the fear, the whole big picture, going to jail and shit. And at this point, I'm a 4.0 student athlete who doesn't even smoke weed or do any drugs. And I'm like, okay, or they're like, who do you get your shit from? And so essentially I made a decision. I was like, all right, I'll give him up. I don't know the guy personally. He's a dude I met, out of nowhere, and that's it. So I end up basically, fast forward a few weeks or whatever, I hit up my boy Junior, my Latin King buddy, and coming down to get another ounce or whatever, and some dude who looks like a freaking cop, who's like, they tell him it's your uncle, driving me in this weird car and shit. It just looked bad, it felt bad. I'm like, all right, so we go into the hood. We go into the hood, and unfortunately for Junior, he came out of his house and he opened his trunk because he kept some of the stuff in there. We do the transaction, and then the cops come out and they arrest him. But they found like a lot of drugs and some guns, I believe, in his trunk. So fast forward, that was like December, 92. I'm supposed to graduate in May or June of 93. I don't have enough credits to graduate. I literally borrowed my grandmother's car and drove down around the city of Milwaukee while all of my peers were graduating from high school. And I just was like, what the hell is going on in my life? But I had been crushing it. I had really turned my life around. And I think a big part of that was, in my estimation, I was failing and doing all these things in a destructive fashion because subconsciously I did not want my father to be able to point and say, that's my son and he's such a success, because I just had so much resentment towards the condition that he was in. And when he was gone, it was like, boom, I can now do the best that I possibly can. And I felt like I had to, because there's nobody there anymore. My mom is a hairdresser. I got to get going, and I'm an adult. So anyway, I negotiated with my guidance counselor at school. They saw the huge improvement in my grades, but I said, listen, there's no way I'm coming back another year to this high school and to get my diploma. What are my options? And he was like, usually you go, you get a GED. But he said, because of how you've done, if you want to go to Milwaukee Area Technical College for one semester next fall, you can get your 4 or 5 credits that you need to graduate, and you do it. You go to school there in their high school program. If you pass those classes, we'll give you a cut-ahead high school. It won't be a GED. And I said, deal. I had met my first love and girlfriend that summer, so a lot was happening. And she was a Dean's List honor student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I told her, I'm going to take a semester and go to Milwaukee Area Technical College to decide where I want to go. Little did she know I was still in high school. I didn't graduate high school on time, But anyway, I had this old-ass van from the 70s that had like carpet in it and like, mirrors on the ceiling and a bed. But it was old as hell. I never knew if it was going to make it downtown each day to go to school. But I got up, that first day in that September, which would be September 93. Get up and I go down to MATC, they call it, first class. I'm in there and I am a minority. I mean, there's maybe like 3 white guys or people in the class. It's all black and brown. And you can tell that, normally guys that look like me are not taking this curriculum to get a GED or in some cases, or get their diploma. But whatever. So I go to the first class, no problem. The second class I go to, no problem. The third, the fourth. I don't know if I had 4 or 5 classes, but my last class of the day in the afternoon was a science class. And I go and I sit down at an open 2-seat table, which is like a bench, not a bench, like stool with a high table. People are shuffling in. I don't know what I was doing. And all of a sudden the guy sits down next to me, and it's Junior. I'm like, what's up, dude? Put a gang member into prison. He served 7 months in Franklin, which is a real prison outside of Milwaukee. And it was because of the quantity of the drugs that I believe he did have a firearm. So that's why he had that time. But he had just gotten out of there and he was coming back to try to get his degree or GED. So what are the odds of that? And I'm sitting there and I know we had like a talk, and if it was me and him one-on-one, I would have probably broken his face. But this is the problem with gang members. They stick together. And I found that out the next day. Do you know how? At a criminal justice class at 10 a.m. in a certain part of that big school. And I realized as the class was ending, I'm watching the activity outside the door. Junior and at least 6 to 10 Mexicans that were all probably a part of their clique, that's where they would meet after that class together, right where I'm coming out. And that first day, I do remember having some fear because I was like, I might get jumped. I know no one in this school. I'm trying to be invisible because I'm embarrassed about the fact that I didn't graduate from high school on time. And I go out there and I see all these guys. I mean, you're talking about like, you know, wearing gang jerseys and everything. And I'm just like, fuck. And guess what? Every day, that's where they met after my criminal justice class. So I literally skipped as much of that school as I could while still passing and getting my degree within a semester, which I did. And it was probably somewhere around the middle of the semester that I stopped seeing Junior around as much. I think he just like quit. So, you know, my fear dissipated, but initially I was like, I don't blame them. They want, you know, they want redemption or something. They're going to at least beat the shit out of me and jump me, if not worse. So I've got this girlfriend on the dean's list who's like a pom-pom girl at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with 60,000 students that I'm going to see every other weekend, living with my mother, driving a brown van from the 70s with Latin kings all around me just to get my high school diploma so that I could actually go to a university, which I did that next semester, thank God, to University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. It's a real school. And the rest is history. I hope you enjoyed the story.